Welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what I do is, of course, talk with webmasters and publishers like all of you to try to make sure that the information that we provide is useful and helps you make better websites, and that any kind of questions that are left open can be answered, but also to bring feedback back to the internal teams as well, so that we see where you're having problems or where you're kind of confused, and we can help to improve that as well. As always, a lot of questions were submitted ahead of time. But if one of you wants to get started with a question directly, feel free to jump on in.
Well, I guess I'll do the honors. Since we talked multiple times regarding a client of mine that's on in a medical niche in Romania, it's been I think it's been about a year since we did the whole disavow thing. And about half a year since we completely rebuilt the website to be more user-friendly and search engine-friendly. And you told me, like in November or October, that you were still seeing some issues with links, and Penguin refresh was needed in order to, see if everything is in order. And since it's been quite a while since the last Penguin, and we also found out from our hosting provider that the hosting plan wasn't actually sufficient for the amount of visits they were getting, so they were actually dropping quite a few sessions. And I don't know if that's been a problem. Fetches Google actually did show quite a few errors often, but we recently changed it to a better plan. So I wonder if that affected it, and if you are still seeing some link issues, and we should wait for the next refresh to maybe see some improvements.
So I guess in general, if there is a problem with regards to like a web spam algorithm like Penguin, you need to wait for that refresh to happen. And I think that's really the main problem you're seeing there. I don't know offhand if I have any technical issues that I can point at there. That's really kind of complicated to do live and give you something useful that you haven't seen already. So one thing I can do afterwards is kind of check it out, the site. If you have a thread in the forum, I can post something there if you want. But with regards to the Penguin issues, that's really something where you need to wait for a refresh before that essentially changes.
Okay, so since it's been half a year since the last Penguin refresh, and you said the last one that lasted over a year between refreshes isn't gonna be as long for the next refresh. So are we expecting something within the next few months, maybe? Or
I don't have any specific dates, so I can't promise you that far ahead of time. Anyway, I don't see anything happening next week. Let's put it that way. But I do know that people are waiting for these kind of updates, and that it would be great to kind of speed things up. So I hope we can do something there.
And are you still hoping it would be less than a year between the last refresh and the next one?
I don't want to make any promises, but I really hope that it'll be a little bit faster, yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Hi, John. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We got recently a client who built a website as a company website from a product name. Now their business has expanded, and they want to have a separate website for the business, and that particular website they want to keep as an only product website. So for the product, as in including support for the product. So what they are doing is they are shifting that website, business website, to a new domain and creating altogether a new website for that product on the same domain that is running. So they are doing the same thing at the same time. So from our point of view, we were suggesting that if they can do one at a time, that would be helpful. So what would you recommend on that?
I agree. So if you're moving from one domain to another and putting something new up on the old domain, then we can't treat that as a site move. So that's like the kind of situation I try to avoid, and either use separate domains for both of these sites, or wait maybe half a year or something like that between actually moving. But doing it at the same time essentially means that it's not a side move for us, and that we can't really forward those signals directly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right. There are two questions here on the doorway page update. Oops. I think I clicked the wrong one. Let's go through this one first then. There have been numerous articles posted on how to attempt to fight referral spam bots from skewing Google Analytics traffic, but they all seem to have setbacks. Is Google working on a solution for this so that the onus doesn't fall on the shoulders of the webmaster? I can't speak for Google Analytics, but I know that this is a problem that they're aware of and something that they'll try to find a solution for. But I don't know what exactly they'd be working on. The thing to keep in mind there is, of course, that this doesn't affect web search. So if you have this kind of referral spam visible in Google Analytics, that's not something that would affect anything from the web search side. It does, of course, make it harder to see your traffic in Analytics, but that's essentially something more on the analytics side, more on the kind of showing the data side than anything that would cause issues with crawling, indexing, or ranking. Here's a doorway page one. I don't have anything newer past the content of the blog post and past what we have in our help center already. There's a lot of information there. I try to focus on that. You provide a sample link there. I don't know how the web spam team would see that, but I'm happy to kind of pass that on to the team to take a look at. I don't know if we can get someone from the web spam team to kind of jump in here and help us with the doorway page questions, but I'll try to find someone here. The last Penguin refresh dates from September 2014 for Panda. It's October 2014. Is Google using a snapshot of the web spam situation of each site from then to compute rankings? If so, what is the benefit of such refresh delays? It could trigger a lot of confusion. So yes, we did update those algorithms at those times, and that's essentially the data that's still being used. But the good thing to keep in mind is that we use over 200 different factors for crawling, indexing, and ranking. So just because your site might be affected by one of these algorithms doesn't mean that there's absolutely no chance for the site to appear in the search results in places. So that's something where all hope isn't lost. You can continue working on your website and continue making it better. And that's something that our algorithms do continually take into account.
John, regarding, since we're still on web spam, is there still any chance that we could see some web spam information in Webmaster Tools in the foreseeable future that will help us SEOs as well that manage multiple clients, as well as webmasters who work with an SEO team? They could see if their, the SEO team is doing some bad link building or things like that, and they would be more aware of this situation, especially since Penguin is off page, so they don't really see anything different with their website. Maybe the website provides a very good user experience, and the customers are very happy, but they don't know what's being built in the background on spamming pages and bad backlinks.
That's, I guess, still one of the top user wishes. So I wouldn't discount that completely, but I don't really see that happening anytime in the near future. So that's something that takes a lot of work with the various policy teams, but also with the search quality teams to see what kind of a metric we could show to webmasters that is actually actionable for the webmaster. That's not just, well, this is how we rank your pages, and if you want to rank better, then you need to make a better website. So it has to be something that I think is useful for the webmaster that they can react to, but also something that's valid from our point of view. That's not just a made-up metric based on something that's not really used like that in search. So
Well,
that's a tricky balance to find, and I don't expect this wish to go away. So it's good to kind of get confirmation that it's still something people would love.
it would be enough, just to tell the webmaster that he's maybe doing practices against the Google guidelines. I mean, even that would be a strong
Well,
enough signal.
I mean, that's something we already do through the manual actions. So if the WebSem team manually looks at the site and says, well, there's really something problematic here, they'll take manual action on that, and that will be visible in Webmaster Tools. We'll also send an email out to the owners. So that's something where when it reaches that level, you do get that information, and you do have a chance to kind of talk to the WebSem team about that with the reconsideration request.
Yep, just wishing it could be for the algorithm update as well.
I understand, yeah. What makes a difference from an innocent guest blog post from a paid one according to Google perspective? Do I need to delete all links that go to non-major sites to make my blog safer when accepting guest posts? Essentially, any kind of guest post where people are dropping links is something that you'd want to kind of take care of on your side, that you're not essentially trading content for links. So that's something that you need to take care of. And you don't need to delete those links. If those are relevant for your users, feel free to keep them there. Just put a no-follow on them so that you're sure that they don't pass PageRank. And if this is really high-quality content that you really want to present to users on your site, and it's not something that these guest blog posters are submitting to hundreds of different sites, then maybe that's content that you'd like to kind of make available on your site. But that's essentially something where you need to watch out that you're not trading content for links. Is it possible to read text data by OCRing an infographic or some visual material that includes text and use that data as a search signal? Also, do you use any computer-generated transcriptions to understand content of non-YouTube videos in the web? I mean, is it possible? It's certainly possible. I know there are lots of tools out there that do OCR over images, and they pull that out. I don't think we use that at the moment. At the moment, we really primarily look at the kind of surrounding text for image search, and we pull that together, and we don't use images directly as a factor for web search. But that's possible that it'll change at some point. And our algorithms are really, really fantastically good, so that even sometimes if there isn't text on an image, we'll understand what this image is about. You can see that, for example, if you have all of your photos in Google Photos and you search for something like, I don't know, a lake or snow or mountains or kind of a house, then you'll see that Google's algorithms are trying to understand what these photos are about and pull that together. So I don't see that being completely out of the question for web search, but at the moment, I don't think that's something that we do. If a page with filtering or narrowing function without any value for search engine potential needs to be no indexed and no followed or not. Also, if similarity ratio between a main page and duplicate page is lower than 70%, do we use rel canonical or just no index? With regards to filtering and narrowing, I take a look at our blog post in the Help Center on faceted navigation. That's essentially where we kind of explain what we're looking for there. On the one hand, you want to make sure that the content you're providing is really high-quality content that you want to have indexed like that. On the other hand, we need to crawl through those categories to actually find the deeper links to the individual pages. And then finally, you don't want Googlebot to kind of get stuck in endless loops and just chasing through all parameters without actually running into anything useful and new. So that's something where you kind of have to balance those three aspects, and our blog post and the Help Center is pretty useful in kind of giving you advice on what you can focus on there. With regards to rel canonical and similarity ratio, that's I guess something I wouldn't look at from a pure metrics point of view. That's something that you really need to look at on your side. You understand your pages best. And if these pages are equivalent, where essentially you could show one or the other to the user and they're actually the same, then using a rel canonical is a great way to kind of let us know about that. And we'll focus on that one page and kind of combine all the signals there. Compared to using a no index, the rel canonical, like I mentioned, combines the signals into one page, whereas a no index essentially drops the signals that we have for that specific page, and the pages that are left kind of have to go collect the signals on their own. So if they're equivalent, I definitely use a rel canonical. If it's just something you don't want to have indexed, then no index is the right thing. Is there any correlation between optimizing crawl budget by using no follow, no index meta tags and canonicals and organic performance? Does Google reward this technical SEO implementations to help spiders in better ways? There is, I guess, some connection there in the sense that, well, I guess in a few ways. On the one hand, if we can crawl the website better, we'll be able to pick up new and change content a lot faster. So that's something where, especially if you have a news-based website or you have blog posts on recent events, then the faster we can crawl your content, the faster we can bring that new information to the search results. And that's something where you could have an advantage. On the other hand, if your website is essentially static and you have information that's valid for a long number of years, then just because we can crawl faster doesn't necessarily make that more relevant. The other aspect is, as I mentioned before, that with a rel canonical, we can combine the signals for a page. So if you have a lot of different pages that are essentially the same, then if they collect links on their own, for example, then all those links will go to those pages individually. If you no index those pages, or if they return 404, then those pages and those links essentially kind of drop out of our graph. Whereas if you use a rel canonical to pick one version of the page that you want to have indexed, then we can compile those signals together and essentially make it so that this page is seen as being as relevant as all of these other pages together, more or less, something like that. If you don't use a rel canonical there and these pages just exist on their own and they're essentially one-to-one copies, then we'll try to figure that out on ourselves as well. So we'll see that these pages are actually identical. We'll fold them together. We'll pick one URL and combine all the signals into that one URL. So there's a little bit that you can do to kind of guide us to pick the right URL with a rel canonical, and compared to a no index or returning 404 for those kind of pages, there's definitely an advantage there from an SEO point of view. But it's not that you have any kind of a magic ranking boost that we have that says, oh, this person knows what it's doing, therefore the website must be more relevant than everything else. Just because it's a technically correct website doesn't mean that it's automatically more relevant to the user. We're observing a dip in organic traffic from our site from March 27th onwards. You've confirmed that it's not Penguin or Panda, just normal algorithm changes. How does the webmaster get to know whether they're affected with the recent algorithm update? So, I mean, we make changes all the time. I think last year we made over 1,000 changes in web search, and some of these changes affect some websites. Some of these changes don't affect other websites. Also, the web is constantly changing, of course. If you're in a competitive area, then maybe your competitors are doing something really well that affects how your website is shown in searches as well. So there are all kinds of changes happening all the time. There are always fluctuations happening. It's not something where I would, as a webmaster, chase these individual changes and try to figure out how can I gain this specific algorithm, but rather just focus on your website and really make sure that it's the absolute best of its kind and that it really works well for users, that it has unique, compelling, and high-quality content, and that, like I mentioned, users really love the site and recommend it to others. So this is something where I kind of take a step back from just focusing on algorithms to actually focusing on your website and focusing on your users.
Hi, John. I just want to follow up on this question. So, I mean, that is something my website. This is basically a news website. So, basically, I see a major dip in the branded search terms. Basically, it's not something specific to generic terms. So we are seeing that is searches coming up with I mean the traffic comes up to website generally from the brand terms, and now it is dipping really high. I mean that is something 30 to 40% of dip in the brand searches only. So
I
any specific reason
can,
for that thing?
I can barely understand you. Is it possible maybe you can type the question in the chat and I'll get to it?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, thanks. There seems to be a lot of noise or dropouts in between there. When will you release a new Webmaster Tools search panel? I've seen the alpha version on Anna's blog, but want to learn the exact release date. I don't think we have an exact release date that we're telling people about. So of course we have plans for when we think this will be ready to launch. But at the moment, we're still gathering feedback and working on improving things there. So that's something where we currently don't have anything specific to announce yet. Despite adding the relevant schema markup and same as values for our brand's social channels, Google searches for the brand still only return 2 of a potential 4 social channels, Google Plus and LinkedIn, in the knowledge graph. When will the others appear? I've seen reports from a few people on that. I've passed them on to the team, but I don't know what specifically we can let you know about there. I think the main thing I'd watch out for is really to make sure that technically your markup is correct, which you can check with the structured data markup testing tool. And if you've done that, then essentially it's a matter of our algorithms processing that and understanding that these are relevant social channels that we need to show there for your website. But if I hear back from the team on something specific, I'll do a quick Google Plus post on that. About hidden content, you told Google will try not to use it as a primary content for a page for ranking. Isn't it too harsh for webmasters who hides desktop content by tabs and buttons just for UX? Should they fix them only for search engines, not for users? Well, from my point of view, this is really something that users see first. So if you're searching for something and you click on a search result in Google and you land on a page and you don't see that content, then that's really confusing. That's something that we found users don't really appreciate. They don't really know what they need to do there. Sometimes it's not even clear that there are different tabs to kind of expand this content. For example, we've often seen people kind of create an article or a page about a specific product, and then there's a small Learn More link on the bottom where if you click that, it expands this really long, almost a Wikipedia article about all of the different variations of the product. And these are the type of things where when users go there, they get confused because they don't see what they're actually trying to find. And from that point of view, that's something where I wouldn't say this improves your user interface by having hidden text. It's really something that users kind of battle with. So that's essentially our algorithms trying to mimic what users would do when they come to a page where this content isn't visible by default. How does Google treat the rel canonical for the same page with and without a trailing slash? Is that good or bad? So essentially, these are separate URLs. It's from when you look at it as a person, you might look at that and say, well, this is kind of the same. One is just with a slash, one is without a slash. But technically, they're separate URLs. They could theoretically lead to different content, so we treat them differently. The same with upper and lowercase characters, for example, in the URL. These are essentially different URLs, technically speaking, and theoretically, they could lead to different content, so we treat them as different URLs. And if you're using a rel canonical there, I'd really make sure that you pick one of these URLs that you want to have shown in search and be consistent with that. So internally link to the right version, whichever one you prefer, with or without a slash. From our point of view, there's no preference. Use that URL in the sitemap file as well. Use the rel canonical correctly for that specific URL so that it's really clear that this is the version that you want to have indexed. And don't leave it up to the search engine to kind of make an educated guess that, well, maybe they want with sometimes and maybe they want without sometimes, or maybe the signal is just too confusing for us to use at all. So if you're going to do something for SEO, really make sure that it's as consistent as possible and not something that search engines have to kind of interpret on their own. Is it okay to submit empty sitemaps to Webmaster Tools? Sure, you can do that, but it doesn't really provide any value. If there's like no URLs in the sitemap files that we can actually crawl and index, it doesn't really make that much sense. It's not that it'll break Webmaster Tools or that anything bad will happen with your website, but it just doesn't really make that much sense. How is the links disavow file handled? How is the links disavow file submitted to Webmaster Tools being handled? Processed immediately, soon afterwards, or just on the next Penguin update? So I guess the correct answer would be yes to all of these variations. So first of all, we have to process the file immediately when you upload it. So we do that to double check that it doesn't have any glaring technical issues. That's something we have to kind of process that immediately. Then when we actually kind of use those links, the disavow file is when we crawl those pages that are linking to your site. So we'll crawl a page that's linking to your site. We'll see that there's a link to your site there, but then we'll check the disavow file and see, oh, well, this website actually doesn't want that specific link counted, and then we'll take that out of the link graph. So that kind of happens ongoing as we crawl the rest of the web. And this is something where you'll see the effects in various algorithms that do look at links. So that's not only in Penguin. In Penguin, however, is a web spam algorithm. It does also look at the links as well. And if you're specifically kind of working on a problem that you see or that you suspect is related to Penguin, then you do have to wait for that update as well. So first you have to upload the disavow file. Then we have to go and crawl those pages, which might take a couple of months, depending on the pages and what we have to crawl there. And then the Penguin algorithm essentially has to do the update. So depending on which part you're looking at, those questions can be yes or no, I guess.
Okay. John,
yes.
Won't the same go for the mobile usability, mobile friendliness algorithm? In other words, it's going to take time to re-index content. So say a site that got ready on the 20th and then the algorithm went live on the 21st or soon thereafter, they could theoretically still see drops in their traffic until the re-indexing of that content, which could be weeks or a month or more.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So of course, we have to kind of look at these pages first to understand that they're actually mobile friendly now. And that's something that if you're doing that just before the 20th, the 21st, then of course the timing is probably not going to be such that you won't see any drop at all. But this is something where the more important pages on your website tend to be crawled a lot faster, so usually every couple of days. So if you kind of uploaded your website on the 20th and the algorithm takes effect like over the 21st or a couple of days after that, then generally we'll have picked up the more important pages from your website by then already. So that's not something where you really need to kind of panic and kind of push to make things happen as quickly as possible. Obviously, for your users, you'll want to have a good mobile-friendly website. So from that point of view, I wouldn't kind of panic and blindly push something out that's half-baked, and instead really make sure that you're pushing something out that's actually really useful for your users that doesn't cause any additional problems. So even if you can't make it on the 21st, or if you can't launch it a week before the 21st so that like more parts of it can be crawled and indexed, I think that's fine. That's not something where I'd kind of be all panicky and work days and nights and weekends to kind of get that live.
And so the more important queries or the most popular queries would most likely get reindexed first?
Not so much based on the queries, but more based on the website itself. So things like the home page, the pages that tend to change very frequently, maybe the category pages, the kind of higher level, more important pages for a website, those are the ones that we tend to recrawl fairly quickly. And if you check your server logs, you can kind of pull out those numbers even and see, well, Google is looking at my home page 2 times a day, so therefore theoretically, I could push it out like half a day before and still have my homepage be seen as mobile friendly. But these are things that vary dramatically from website to website, and we'll try to get the important pages every couple of days for normal websites. For websites that are really have been maybe static for 10 years now, that's something where we've learned that this website is always the same, so it doesn't really make sense to kind of recrawl it every day to get a confirmation that nothing has changed since the last 10 years. So there's a little bit of a balance there.
So that can go like 3 months or more, even for long-term content.
I mean, it always takes a while for us to pick up content that usually doesn't change, that gets crawled fairly rarely. One thing you can do there is use the fetch and render, the fetch and submit function in Webmaster Tools. If you have, for example, a category page that leads to all of your lower level page, and you can submit that page and say, this page and all the link pages should be recrawled as soon as possible. You can also set up a sitemap file and say, well, all of my pages have changed recently. I updated my whole website. It has a new change date on it, and we'll try to use that as well to speed up crawling of those changed pages.
All right, thanks.
All right, let me get to the question you posted in the chat. We're a news website and we're observing a dip in traffic for mostly brand searches. Our rankings are intact, but we see this dip in traffic by 20 to 30%. We really don't understand what's causing this dip, how to diagnose this particular situation, why the dip in traffic. That's always hard to kind of understand what might be happening there. I don't see the website directly, and I'd probably have to take a deeper look to see much more there. One thing I would look at there is also from a technical point of view, if everything is really working the way it should be, if there are like no technical errors in Webmaster Tools, maybe check your server logs to see if there are any technical issues there. Because as I mentioned before, things like the home page, they do get recrawled and re-indexed fairly quickly. So if you're seeing a drop in traffic for these branded queries that traditionally would go to your home page, then my guess is maybe something with the home page is fluctuating, that maybe from time to time it's dropping out of the index, and you're not specifically seeing that directly. So I'd really kind of take a look at the technical side of things and make sure that technically your pages are returning the right content, that they're returning the right result code, that nothing technical is broken there.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Can duplicate content across different websites, not using canonical links, trigger an algorithmic penalty and lower your rankings? Is it a negative signal? There's conflicting information about this on the net. This is kind of a tricky question in the sense that if just pages from your website are duplicated across the web, maybe you have like your main website and the marketing website, and it's exactly the same content. You just use one maybe for offline advertising, something like that. Then in most situations there, we'll recognize that and just pick one of these URLs to show in search. And that's not something where we demote a website for having this kind of duplication, be that internally in the website or across websites like that. Essentially what we do there is we'll try to recognize that these pages are equivalent and fold them together in the search results. So it's not that they'll rank lower, it's just that we'll show one of these because we know that these are essentially equivalent, and just show that one in search for the user. And that's not something that would trigger a penalty or that would lower the rankings. That's not a negative signal from that regard. I would use a rel canonical there if you can. Sometimes I know maybe there are technical reasons that it's really hard to set that up properly, but if you can set that up with a rel canonical, that's probably best. The types of situations where we might take, for example, manual action on duplicate content is more if one website is just a compilation of content from a bunch of other websites, where we kind of look at this website and we see, well, they're scraping the New York Times, they're scraping some other newspaper sites, they're rewriting some articles, they're spinning some other articles here, and we can see that this is really just a mix of all different kinds of content sources, and that there's really no additional value in actually even bothering to crawl this website. And that's the type of situation where the web spam team might take a look at that and say, well, we really don't need to waste our resources on this. We can essentially just drop this out of the index, and when the webmaster is ready and has something unique and compelling on the website and kind of has removed all of this duplicated content, then we can talk about a reconsideration request and go through that process there. So just because there's some duplication across the web from your content, I wouldn't really worry about that. If, on the other hand, your website is really just an aggregation of content from all over the web, then that's something I would take action on and just clean up and make sure that you're really providing something new, something unique and compelling of your own, something that's high quality and not just rewritten or copied content from other sources. You separate search performance KPIs by mobile and desktop in this new search panel. Some major SEO tools have also changed their visibility signals for desktop and mobile. There's a 21st of April a milestone for mobile search. Why do you need to separate them? We separate them so that you can also see them separately in Webmaster Tools. I think that's sometimes really useful because you'll see things like maybe people on mobiles are searching slightly differently, and maybe they're looking for slightly different content on your site, and that might be interesting information to have. You might also see that on the 21st of April or afterwards, when we make the ranking change for mobile, that maybe your desktop site is still ranking fairly well, but your mobile site has kind of taken or the users on mobile kind of don't see your site as much because it's not recognized as being mobile friendly. So these are things where I think having more insight into what people on mobile are actually doing really gives you a little bit of information that you can use to improve your website, but that you can also use to recognize problems. For example, if you see that people on desktop are searching for just, I don't know, 2 keywords that are kind of generic to your website, and on mobile they're looking for your business location or your phone number, then that's something that you can kind of think about and see, well, maybe this is information that I should actually have on my website more prominently. Maybe I should mark it up in a way that Google could pick it up. Maybe I need to make sure I have the local business page set up properly. All of these things can kind of give you more information about what's happening and where things are headed. Also, mobile is a really strong factor at the moment for a lot of websites. We're seeing websites that have essentially more mobile traffic than they have desktop traffic. So that's something I really wouldn't disregard, and I really wouldn't compile it all into one single bucket and say, this is all of my users, and they're all essentially the same. We can treat them as something generic. Maybe they have different wishes. Maybe there's something that they're looking for in a different way that you could do better on your website.
Hi, John. I have a question on that.
Okay.
If we are considering both the searches and the intent of the user different based on the devices, so I believe means I do not have clarity on that. If we are putting an alternate URL on desktop site, that it is a corresponding URL, but if the intent would be failing, so this result may not be appearing on that. So how can we tackle on that front?
I don't
We have
understand the question quite. Can you repeat it?
yeah, we have a website called a.com. This is a desktop website. Then we have m.a.com. So we have used an alternate tag to map the URLs. However, you mentioned that we use different intent as a device. We use as a user on a different devices. We have different intents. So appearing means mapping those URL may not be accurate from that aspect, and it may affect our SEO rankings altogether if we map those URL, because you will be showing only URL in that. Did you get my point?
Okay, so I think you're asking that if the user is searching for something slightly different that doesn't match what you have in your desktop page, that's more relevant for the mobile page, that
Yeah.
we should be showing something different. In a
Yeah.
case like that, what I would do is consider maybe setting up a new page that has this information that the mobile user is looking for, that also has a desktop variation of that page. So instead of only focusing on what people want to do on a desktop, think about what they want to do on desktop and mobile, and make sure that you have pages for both of those variations. So that's something where you really kind of have to think about what the user is trying to do there and make sure that you're kind of covering those needs. And some of that you can see in the search query information in Webmaster Tools. Some of that you might see in analytics, how they're kind of transversing through your website, if they're looking for more information, if they're looking for your address or something like that. These are sometimes small things that you can just add to your pages on the footer and say, well, here's our address on the bottom. And if they're on a mobile, then maybe that's all that they need. And so with that in mind, it's not something that I think you need to do significantly different for a lot of websites, but you do really need to look at this from a per-site basis. And something that works well on your website or that's important for your user on your website doesn't necessarily mean that it's important for users on other websites too.
That's true, but well, keeping that thing in mind, I believe the mobile development work would increase, because from a desktop point of view, we can keep a lot of information from various intents, like Wikipedia does. But at the same time, mobile pages usually don't have that much of information. So we segregate every intent in a different page on the mobile. So we will be creating more pages on mobile and lesser number of pages on desktop in this regard. So means, and in current scenario we do the other thing around, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can also make pages that only have a mobile version. That's also fine. You don't need to always map it to a desktop version. Of course, if you're using responsive design, you automatically have both of those versions anyway. But if you want to make pages that are specifically focused for mobile and you don't have a desktop variation, that's totally up to you. You can do that.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
John, I've also been using the Search Analytics Alpha, and I had some questions about that, because as you mentioned, you can see the different devices. So there's a really big difference with some websites. Like one I'm looking at has 500,000 clicks on desktop, 1.5 million clicks on mobile, and then the ranking average positions are very different too, like 14 average on desktop and only 5 on mobile. So if mobile usability is not the big is not the factor there, then what are some of the big differences that I'm seeing? I mean, I'm seeing huge differences across other sites too.
Usually what I do in a case like that is drill down and look at the queries and look at the pages that are actually shown there. So that's something where sometimes you'll see in the queries that they're searching slightly differently, or they're searching for different content. Maybe when they're searching on the phone, they kind of focus more on one aspect of the search, and on desktop they focus more on a different aspect of the search. So that's something where I think it's totally natural to see differences in impressions and clicks and rankings even in general, because people are doing different things on mobile than they are on desktop. And this is the kind of information where if you drill down into that, you might spot patterns where you see, well, on mobile, people are searching for this, but actually our website doesn't really provide this information in a really useful way on mobile. We should fix that. And that's something where I think if you can interpret that information and pull out what makes a difference there, that can be really useful for the website.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing I mean, there's even drilling down to specific queries. I still see, you know, some big differences on certain queries with, you know, ranking position.
I mean, there are a variety of things that come into that. On the one hand, there might be personalized results happening there. There might already be boosts, maybe if you have an app associated with the website. There are things like the location of the user, the language settings that they're using. All of these things kind of come into play. And the ranking that we show in Webmaster Tools is what we effectively showed the user in the search results. So it's not something that's theoretically compiled where we say, well, for this keyword, we would generally rank it at, I don't know, position 15. We really look at the search results that we presented to users and aggregate those numbers for the ranking positions there. So that's something where you would expect to see some variation depending on who searches, where they're searching from, what kind of personalization they're getting, what, I don't know, what all they're specifically looking for.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
John? John?
Yes.
John, I want to ask about link building. Actually, I'm a new in SEO, so I want to know what is link building and does it affect SEO? And what about duplicacy in content? Because I'm a writer also, so I want to improvise my writing here to, improve my SEO also. Could you please explain this?
Okay. So with link building, what we generally tend to see is that people just go out and try to get links for their websites in ways that are essentially against Google's guidelines. And this can cause significant problems in the long run. So there are lots of ways that we see people like send out emails to like all kinds of websites, say, hey, you should link to my content, that try to exchange links, that try to buy links, that try to drop links in forums or in comments. And a lot of these techniques are essentially just spammy techniques where they're trying to get links to kind of skew Google's algorithms without them actually being normal, natural links. So that's something I'd really recommend shying away from and really trying to avoid as much as possible. Essentially, making sure that you have really great content is our primary motivation there. And that's something where if you have fantastic content and users go to your website and they really like it, they'll try to recommend it further. And those are the type of natural links that we kind of try to count in our algorithms, and we think that these are relevant for the user, they're relevant for our algorithms, we'll try to count that. But anything where you kind of artificially go out of your way to just get links to your content without there being this kind of natural relationship there, that's something we even see as kind of web spam. So I'd really try to avoid that. With regards, sorry?
What about one-way link building?
How do you mean?
One-way link building? Yeah, hello?
Yeah, one-way link building. Essentially, that's the same. If you're trying to place links on one site just to point to your website, that's not really natural. That's not something that we'd see as being a natural link. That's something I'd really avoid doing.
Okay.
Hi, John.
Sure.
Hello. I've got a question about links and if you're making a HTTPS switchover from a non-secure website. Basically, if someone makes a full switchover, I think if someone's linking to a deep page, they'll generally copy-paste and it'll go to the HTTPS. But say if they're linking to your homepage just because they know about your brand and they're using a blogger or WordPress or something like that, I think they might just type in your website and put it to the HTTPS non-canonical. And if this happens a lot after a HTTPS switchover, can it create sort of confusing signals for Google and to which version you actually want? Or?
Theoretically, something like that could cause some confusing signals for us. In practice, I don't think that's something you really need to worry about. Because if within your website you're linking consistently, if you're using a rel canonical consistently, that's something that we really look at, where we see There's a rel canonical. The internal links are the same. You're doing a redirect from that version to your preferred version. So if people are linking to the wrong version, that's a really small thing. On the other hand, if internally you're not really doing something to confirm all of those signals to say, well, the HTTPS is really the version I want to have indexed, then of course there's a potential for some confusion there where we see, well, lots of people are linking to this version. Internally, there's really no clear preference. So what should we do there? So as with a lot of things around SEO, the clearer you can make it, which one you want to have indexed, the more likely we'll actually.
Okay, thanks.
Hello? 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 John? Hello?
Yeah, we
I want
hear
to
you,
ask
but
about.
maybe John needs to.
Whoa. It crashed.
Yep, he just got hung. There you go.
Oh, man, it logged me out.
Hello?
Yes,
John?
I'm back.
Yeah. I want to ask about directory submission. Would you please explain?
Okay. Directories are essentially the same thing, where if you're doing this to get links to your website, those are essentially unnatural links. And that's something where we've seen a lot of people just use the directory submissions as a way to try to build links to your website without these actually being natural links. So that's something I'd certainly avoid if you're doing that to try to build links. On the other hand, if these are useful directories where you see people are actually going to these directories, and you see that people are actually using them to find information, maybe they're like local directories or yellow pages, those kind of things, then that's something that might be relevant to your website. But I certainly wouldn't do it for link building.
Okay, and what about content updation? I mean, at what time of period I should change my content according to the scenario?
Changing the content, I would see that as something that you would do naturally whenever the content needs to be changed. It's not, I wouldn't do it in the sense that you have to kind of keep updating your content to keep it fresh and to unnaturally kind of change the words around every now and then to make it look like something changed. But if something changed and you want to update that on your pages, that's absolutely fine. You can let us know about that change with a sitemap file or with Fetch as Google in Webmaster Tools so that we can pick up that change as quickly as possible. But just because something changes doesn't necessarily mean it's more relevant. So I wouldn't just blindly go through and update content just for the sake of having changed it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It looks like I'm not the only person with technical problems today. Sorry about that. Let me run through some of the questions here, and maybe we'll have a bit more time for other questions as well. We have a poster website with more than 20,000 images. How important is it to have an image sitemap? I definitely do an image sitemap if you're focusing on images. We have an XML sitemap already, but currently don't have the images. What would you recommend? I certainly set up an image sitemap if a website really focuses on images and wants to be seen in image search. Would Google penalize two websites from the same company offering the same products even if the content was different? In general, we wouldn't manually penalize a website or a company just because of that. If there are like a handful of sites that are kind of similar for one company, then that's not something we'd really take action on. If, on the other hand, it's a large number of websites that's essentially just duplicating and just alternating keywords, then that's something we'd see more like a doorway collection or doorway sites, and we try to take those out. But just because there are two websites that are kind of similar, owned by the same company, doesn't necessarily make that web spam. Sometimes there can be good reasons for that. For example, one thing we often see is that a company will have a consumer website for their products and a business-to-business version of their website where they don't really want to mix that because it's a very different audience, but the actual products that they supply are essentially the same. And that's not something where we'd say, well, this is spam, we need to take it out. Manually, we removed some links, updated a lot of links to disavow tool, and added a lot of new links. But after now 2 years, the site is still without ranking. Is it possible to submit the site to Google Web Spam team to check out? If you don't have any manual actions, then there's nothing really the web spam team can do there because there's nothing manual that needs to be tweaked there. What I would, however, do is maybe post in the help forum to get advice from peers who might have run into similar situations. So that's something you can definitely do. And also, if you post in the help forums, our top contributors can escalate issues that they feel are totally confusing or wrong or broken, and let us know about that directly. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Lots of questions. Let me see if there are some mobile questions, just to make sure that we have those covered before things go crazy. We use dynamic serving for the mobile version. All sites have a mobile-friendly button, but the home page doesn't have one. The mobile-friendly tool says that everything's correct, and the home page is mobile-friendly. Can this be a problem for us? I definitely post that in the help forum or send that to me directly, and I can take a quick look at that as well. Maybe there's something small technical on your side that we're not picking up properly. All right. Last questions.
Should I?
Sure, go for it.
Actually, my question is related to knowledge panel.
Okay.
Okay. So suppose I'm working for a firm. Actually, that firm operates in a local city, but it offers a service and all these things in multiple countries. And in Google Places, I registered my office as a local business.
Okay.
And in Google Knowledge Panel, I want to show that where we serve, like we serve in USA, Singapore, everywhere we serve. But it's showing only my local place. I hope this
that would be something probably based on the local business listing that you have there, the Google Plus local listing. So I don't think that's something that we specifically kind of handle differently for international websites. Obviously, if you're an international business, you will still have one place where your business is actually located, or maybe multiple places. But it's not the case that we would say, well, you operate in all of these different countries, therefore we'll list them separately. So that's not something you'd need to list separately there. I think the local listing is primarily important if someone really is local, is searching for your business, your place of business, where you're physically located, then that gives them more information. But it's not something that I'd say is critical if someone is searching maybe in the US and looking for a specific product that you're also offering.
Actually, one more thing is related to this. In titles, we are putting the same thing that we serve in Singapore, we serve in USA. Mm-hmm. So whenever it goes with Google, whenever Google searches, it shows the result that we are serving in USA, in Singapore. But in Knowledge Panel, it's just showing that we are from a particular country, but we are serving in different regions. So does it Google treat it like it's not good?
No, I think that's actually fine like that. So I'm assuming, like with the knowledge panel, you mean the map that we sometimes show on the side? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That's essentially the local maps listing. That's not something where we would say this is negative for people who are searching in the US. So that wouldn't result in a demotion or anything like that. That's totally normal that a business that's based in one country is active globally. I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
John?
Sure, go for it.
Question. If the toolbar PageRank is not going to be updated, is there any reason why, or what would be the reason that you don't just turn that feed off? I mean, wouldn't you prefer that, or?
I imagine it's just a matter of like balancing the efforts there, because turning one specific aspect of the toolbar off is probably more complicated than just saying, well, it's time to I don't know, deprecate the toolbar in general. And maybe that's essentially just what we're going to be doing. Like at some point saying, well, this isn't really that relevant anymore. We don't really have that many users anymore. We'll just turn off the toolbar in general, and that includes all of the features. Because if we have to take out individual features from something that's not actively being maintained, that's always a lot of work and has a potential for causing more trouble than actually just leaving it running.
Mm-hmm. So we're not necessarily mentally ready for the full phase out.
I don't know. I think at some point it'll just naturally happen because it's not really supported that well on that many browsers anymore. And a lot of browsers have a lot of the functionality already built in nowadays. So you can bookmark things, you can have things translated. Sorry?
With the disavowing projects, it's been useful because you can see, sites that have lost a lot of PR that were problem sites. So from that aspect, it's actually been quite useful, and so in a way, I think it's been not fair to some sites because it hasn't updated in a year and a half.
Yeah.
In a way.
I mean, I wouldn't focus on this as an important metric. So I think it's something at some point we'll have to take that step and kind of clean that up completely. But I don't think that's happening just now, and I don't think that's something where we take the toolbar apart and say, well, this part is completely deprecated now, but these other parts are still kind of in use. It's always a lot of work to kind of separate things once they're in one compiled place already. But yeah, I know there are people who are always eyeing that and saying, well, maybe it's time now, or maybe we should just wait until this next update of the other browser, and then we'll do it. But I don't think we have any specific timeline yet.
All right, thanks.
All right. With that, we're kind of out of time. And
John.
one last question. Okay. One final question.
Okay. Can you see I posted another thing in chat?
Yes.
There's two titles on a page. One is Singapore-based IT company, software company in Singapore. Then again, there is 3 or 4 times we are using Singapore. So one thing I want to know, what is keyword stuffing there? And if you see the another page, we are using Singapore WordPress development. We are repeating WordPress keyword as like 10 to 12 times, I guess.
Yes,
so
we would see that as
I
keyword
just want
stuffing.
to know.
So what would happen in practice there is we would recognize that these words are being repeated over and over again, and that this isn't really a descriptive title of the page, and our algorithms would try to create a new title on their own. And that's probably what you also see in search when you search for something general where your website would be showing. If you do a site query in search, then we'll probably show you the title that you provided there. But if you search for something like, I don't know, Singapore WordPress development, then chances are we'll rewrite the title that you give us and we'll create something new because we think the title you provided there isn't really that descriptive for the users.
Okay, so it will not penalize us in Google, I guess.
It won't penalize you, but it doesn't do your site much of a favor either, because since we don't show it, we have to make something up on our own. And as always, when algorithms make up something on their own, it's probably not as good as what you would make up if you were marketing this specifically to your users. So that's something where I try to find something short, maybe, I don't know, I'm just picking a number here, 7 or 9 words that kind of describes your site or this page that you're talking about without just using keywords.
Okay, thank you. It was informative, actually.
Sure, great. All right, with that, let's take a break here. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for all of the questions. If I didn't get to your questions, feel free to resubmit them in one of the future Hangouts, and hopefully we can get to them then. I received some feedback that some people would like the format to be slightly different, so we'll see what we can do there in the future Hangouts. Maybe we'll try out some things. I'll set up the new Hangouts later today, so at least the times and dates will be there. I think we have, from the timing, one will probably be right on the 21st, so we can kind of compile that with all of the nervous energy of what's going to happen then. So with that, I wish you all a great weekend, and hope to see you guys again one of the future Hangouts.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Bye, John.
Thanks, John.